Chapter 24. The decision was instantaneous. Noguchi calling out to Lara and Jess with the same breath that had inhaled Yautja musk. The hunters probably knew it was she, and it occurred to her in that same instance that the recognition might inspire a different kind of hunt. She had to separate Lara and Jess. Being marked as Noguchi's friend certainly wouldn't buy them any favour. Besides which, she'd led the trusting pair from the arms of the hunters into the dangers of a bug zone and back again. She couldn't have known about the bugs, but she was responsible for what happened next, having taken it upon herself to step into a leadership role. As soon as she shouted them towards the dying light of the station fire, she veered left, running in the opposite direction. If the hunters went after Lara and Jess, the fire should confuse their infrasensors, the reason they even had infra finally clear, but chances were good that they'd be coming after her first. There's no enemy like an old enemy, after all. An ordinary human trophy would be nothing next to her skull on one of their walls. Any blooded worth his mark would have made the connection between the crashed ship and her running with humans. The magnitude of the betrayal such that they might very well leave off the hunt, calling for her extermination over all else. She'd known that they would want her dead, but it hadn't figured that prominently in her plans. She hadn't known that she would be working to save only 2 people, that there would also be so few targets for the hunters' hatred. It probably couldn't be helped, but she had to at least try and redirect their attention. Lead them towards the bugs. Circle back for Lara and Jess and see if we can't find top-notch ship. If she'd read the signal right back on the shell, his transport was only about a click and a half west from her current boom. Noguchi was already diving, rolling through the tangle of bushes as a fiery rain of leaves fell all around her. She was on her feet and running again before they finished dropping, zagging right. The alien grounds were close. She should be drawing attack any second. Drones sometimes gathered unhatched eggs on seeded planets, protecting them fiercely. It was a bad place to lead novice hunters. Dangerous. And if those chasing her now didn't break off their pursuit, they were going to have more to deal with than a single renegade Ooman. And there, coiling out of the dark like a bone ghost, a leering, lashing drone, hopping into her path from one of the 100 places. Noguchi dodged left, pivoting, throwing herself back against a willowy tree as she brought up her burner. She fired, the blast catching the bug's shoulder, spinning it away. And she heard the clattering, trilling cry of a hunter, a leader. A howl joined by 5, 7, 10 others more. If they hadn't recognized her before, any question was now gone, and she'd given them their target, killing without instruction in front of a leader and his group. The rising cries grew in ferocity, a harmony of bloodlust that she'd once participated in. The one experience she'd shared with the predatory clan, that she'd understood. The fevered, soul-consuming joy of hunt. And this time, she was their prey. But not an easy kill, her thoughts reaffirmed. They want to fight? They've got it. Noguchi slipped around the tree and was away, the howl of the hunters met by the screams of approaching drones, the two blending into a hellish music that spun up into the darkness, a melody of war. Parts of the station fire had died to embers, chemical smoke and heat, but no flame. Jess and Lara moved as far as they could into the mass of debris, the wreckage seeming to stretch forever. They found a large, jutting piece of blackened deck to stand behind, shielded from the open jungle. But it was too hot to lean against, and as the moments ticked past, Noguchi nowhere to be seen, Jess felt his energy failing. They heard animal sounds, screams, bugs, and something else, from not far away. But he couldn't find the desire to care. He blinked, rubbing at his burning eyes. And suddenly Lara was supporting him, holding him up, Jess fighting off a wave of vertigo and nausea. "Jess, are you okay?" He let himself lean on her as much as he thought he could, smiling wearily at the look of worry on her smudged face. A couple of weeks ago, she'd been his boss, contracted company on the HK Max team he'd been serving time on. Hard to believe how much had changed, and he felt a sudden rush of love for her that was entirely pure, a feeling of connection that had nothing to do with sex or power or their positions in life. This woman, this person, had backed him up when things were bad, and continued to do so, because of who she was. Me too, Lara. As long as I'm able, you got what I have. There weren't enough good words to express such a depth of camaraderie, and besides, it was cornball. He shook his head, thinking that human beings surely were a messed up bunch. It was no wonder Noguchi had opted to fly away with a bunch of aliens. I'll survive, he said, then grinned. Then, it isn't really up to me, is it? Lara grinned back, opening her mouth to reply, and they heard Noguchi's voice less than half a metre away, startling both of them. Were either of you hurt? She stepped around the hunk of burnt deck as noiselessly as she'd approached, removing her mask as both of them shook their heads, Jess wondering again who the hell this woman was. I'm sorry. I ran into a hunting group, she said. I led them back towards the drones, but I don't know if they engaged. We'll have to steer clear of both, hope for the best. Her lightly sweating face was as calm as if she'd just told them what the weather was like. The leader, one of the hunters, has a ship, maybe 2 kilometers that way? Noguchi went on, pointing west. It won't be guarded. She trailed off, and Jess realised that she was studying him, her sharp gaze taking in his stance and the bruises on his face. Will you be okay to walk? He didn't give her a knee-jerk response, realising that a macho, yeah, of course, while good for his ego, wasn't going to help all that much if he collapsed in the jungle. Jess took a deep breath, feeling the aches from Keen's beating, from the run-in with the hunter, from the station's crash, and nodded, knowing that he could go on. I'm good. Not for long, maybe, but I'm still good, he said. Noguchi watched him a moment longer, then nodded, slipping her mask back on. We'll pass back by where your friend was lost, then onto the ship. Stay close to me, both of you. Jess and Lara exchanged a look of understanding at her words, of mutual unhappiness and a reluctant acceptance. By unspoken agreement, they hadn't talked about the kid, about what they were going to do if they couldn't find him. But Noguchi had just said it for them. If they couldn't find Ellis, they'd have to leave him behind. We'll find him, and if we don't, we can come back. Do flybys until the sun's up. We're sure to see him. He held on to the thought, promising himself that they wouldn't leave Bunda without Ellis. Or Ellis's body. Following Noguchi, they moved out from behind the broken deck, stepping carefully through the smoking pieces of the station, heading back towards the deeply shaded jungle. And then Jess heard something he'd heard before, in his nightmares and in the field, and felt his gut clench, felt his hopes for all of them dwindle to nothing. A monstrous shriek of animal fury, of hatred, of power and darkness, spilling out of the trees and enveloping them. Queen. The bug mother stepped out into the open from their left and screamed again, and at that sound of her terrible voice there was a crashing through the brush all around, hisses and trumpeting calls, her sleek children coming to join her. As one, they raised their weapons, and saw a band of giants glide out of the dark to their right, armoured and masked. Noguchi's hunters. Most held bladed staffs, and all stood as warriors, silent and faceless, watching the trio of humans and giving nothing away. For a beat, nothing moved. It was just enough time for Jess to take aim, and then everything exploded at once. Boom! Lara felt the burner heave up into her hands, the shot hitting a drone in front of the Queen, the blast echoed by Jess, and then Noguchi as they fired. Oh fuck, what a mess. And they were falling back, Lara firing again, swinging the weapon over to the charging hunters, the bugs shrieking, Noguchi screaming words she couldn't hear. Noguchi's alien soldiers had flown into the group of drones, stabbing and howling, at least 2 of them firing burners of their own. Lara stumbled, firing, hitting another of the bugs as it threw itself in front of the Queen. Dozens of drones pouring out of the jungle like a plague, surrounding their mother and lunging for both the hunters and their own tiny group. Noguchi spun and fired, the strobing explosions of her burner taking out bug and hunter alike. Jess shouted something, and a blast from a hunter's weapon blew past Lara close enough for her to feel its heat, deck shrapnel slapping at her lower back from the explosion. Lara swung her burner, found the warrior, and watched its masked head fly apart, the huge body hesitating headless in the air before crumpling. And another hunter was scooping up the burner, firing it in their direction as a drone flew at him, clawing him to the ground, its grinning skull jaws tearing into his hidden flesh. The Queen continued her bursts of screams, all but hidden by a mass of her minions, bugs jumping into battle as more came out of the dark, running at the hunters dancing and cutting like samurai, and both alien groups slowly, steadily gaining ground on the 3 humans. Lara didn't think about it, couldn't, aiming and firing and aiming again. The bugs blasted into acid splash as the hunters dodged and fought and somehow managed not to die. Click, click, click. And Lara heard Noguchi's weapon go dry, even over the screams and explosions, the sound as chilling and terrible as the Queen's fury. Lara stepped forward, jabbing her burner at Noguchi as the woman dropped the dead one, taking hers. And in the half second that Noguchi wasn't firing, the tide of the slaughter drew closer. Lara fumbled for her handgun. Not enough. They'll all go dry. We're dead. They continued to back away, but there was no denying that it was a matter of minutes, seconds before they were overrun. To turn and flee was certain death, by burner or by bug. And Lara found a hunter's masked face and fired, the bam, bam, bam of the semi adding a tempo to the bloody battle. Firing because it was that, or give up. And suddenly, so suddenly that Lara didn't understand for a moment what was happening, hunters and drones alike began to collapse. The sound of rapid fire, dull thunder to her ringing ears. There was a stuttering light washing across the falling bodies, across all of them. It was the muzzle flash of a pulse rifle, M41 or 56, and Lara's uncomprehending gaze followed the flashing burst to their source, to their right and behind, and saw Max. Standing in the midst of the ocean of debris, small fires licking at the suit's giant legs, bright tongues against the matte orange of its armoured body. Max took a step towards them, still firing, one mighty quad-tread foot crunching down through a layer of broken station, its left arm sending a constant stream of armour-piercing death into the fray. "Ellis," she whispered, the sound lost in the rain of bullets and the Queen's screaming retreat, her brood swarming around her like a living veil. The hunters, too, melted back into the jungle, leaving their fallen behind, the crush of bodies smoking from the wash of drone blood. Max continued to fire, and Lara felt Jess's hand on her arm, pulling at her, dragging her back behind their shield of docking where Noguchi stood, her calm finally broken. She'd removed her mask and stared wide-eyed at the monster robot that had stepped into the alien war, not understanding. They'd found their friend. They'd found Ellis, and Noguchi didn't know yet what the interface meant for the man inside. But Lara felt a wrenching sadness sweep over her. Ellis was with Max again.